Rural School Turnaround and Partnership Development that is due in January. So this was the perfect catalyst to get me to write what I need to write and have it submitted on time. So that's great. What I would like to do is just share a little bit about my background before we start. But within the hour, we'll go over the process. Partnership development is one of the things that I really enjoy doing. So it has become one of my areas of research. And what I thought today was that you probably really didn't want a lot of information or background about the research related to partnership development, since it's professional development, but more about the process and how to get it done and what to anticipate and some of the stumbling blocks. So we'll go through that. I have discussion at the end, but really I'm open to discussion throughout and would welcome the conversation. For some reason, you all just popped off of my screen, so I can't see you at all, which is quite interesting. But please unmute at any given time and just jump in, and we'll make it as informal and open conversation as possible. Just a little background information about me. I'm a visionary leader, a servant leader. I don't know that I believe anything is impossible. I believe there are things that we have not figured out how to do, and there are some things that we don't want to do because of the difficulty or the resources that go into them. But I believe that we can do anything that we put our minds to. And I definitely believe if we work together, we can get more accomplished. So just if you didn't know, and most of you don't know, I'm an only child. So I really like people and collaborating with people. So spending time with individuals brings me joy. So this is just part of who I am as a person. I'm goal-oriented, so it's not just about relationship. I noticed, especially when I was at the University of Southern Mississippi, the word relationship was used a lot. And relationships are very important, but we have to have some goals and some outcomes. Otherwise, it's just a matter of friends getting together or acquaintances getting together and having good fellowship. I'm a social justice advocate, very active in the community, have been for years. Even when I was super commuting all over the South, I was still really active here in Memphis, engaged in several different organizations, which is also a part of the partnership development process for me. With those organizations, I've been able to reach out to other smaller units and help them to develop their community engaged entities and to help write grants for them. In addition to that, I'm an activist trainer and development developer. Previously, I've taught a class that was on social justice and service. It had a large service component, and it was related to disability studies. So we were really active in the community, and from that, several students became advocates and activists across the nation, some of them leaving Alabama to go as far as California and overseas to start programs. I do have a partner. I'm married, have been for 18 years now, and I have 2 school-aged children that are teenagers, which is a new stage. One is 15 and one is 13, and they keep me actively involved in organizations and activities that are interesting to them. So I get to see the spectrum at this time. It's an interesting time for me. So I get to see the geriatric side of things because my mother is here with us, and then what I do on a daily basis and what my children do. So it's a nice span to see how all of our partnerships interact and overlap and how they're different. So with partnership development, it started for me a long time ago. Probably, to be honest, it started in school when I was in elementary and high school. But it really cultivated and was more fully developed when I became a college professor and started working on grant projects and different collaborative ventures with other faculty members, school districts, and organizations. So that's the formal part that I like to talk about more, but also bring into play the informal, because I think it really impacts the way that I view partnership development and the model that I was able to design after doing this for so long. So for the purpose of today's professional development, partnership development is basically mutually beneficial collaborative work between groups and individuals. So we'll review that process, the model, the procedures. I won't go deep into analysis of data and things of those things, but I will share some of the studies that were conducted and some of the outcomes. This is a busy screen. What I did was, one, in the middle is the partnership development process. And then around, you'll see some of the logos for several of the different entities that I had the opportunity to develop partnerships with and work with over the years. Some of them are local and some of them are not. But for each one, they're very unique and different, and they range from K-12 schools to universities, historically Black colleges and universities, health organizations, early childhood, early Head Start centers, community centers. So it's a wide variety, and I find that the partnership development process works with all of them. Sometimes you have to tweak it. With anything, I believe in tailored types of services, but the overall model works. Just to give you some background, the one that I like to use the most is Tuscaloosa City Schools, because getting that partnership started was an interesting process. Almost a difficult process. So the superintendent was very nice. However, he was a very busy man, and I started attempting to schedule a meeting with him in October. I believe it was March before we actually met, and we had 5 different meetings that were canceled. And when I walked in, he said, "You're persistent." And I said, "I just know that you're really busy and you have a lot going on and a lot of people are trying to get to you. But I think it's really important that we talk." And I'll tell you why I found that to be important, that I connected with him. Because when I went to the University of Alabama to be the chair of the Department of Special Education there, one of the things that the faculty said over and over was, "We do not have a relationship with the schools. We cannot get in to do research. We can't partner with them." And I wanted to work to change that. So the initial contact may be slow coming. That was the purpose of me sharing that. It may be slow coming. It may not be something that happens overnight. And I know that when we're working, especially when we're working to do research or to place students or to do different things, sometimes we have a timeline that we're looking at. With the partnerships, they have to be cultivated and developed over time. So it may not fit within a small window, but once you cultivate those partnerships, then it's easy to call and say, "I have a 2-week window. Will you work with me on this?" Compared to a cold call without the background being there. And I think that's part of the reason the faculty had difficulty getting some of their research underway, because those relationships and that partnership had not been developed. During the initial contact, it's not really a time for you to go in and chat. and have conversation about whatever. It's that time for you to have a fully developed elevator speech. Be very clear about what your strengths are, what your purpose is, what you want to accomplish. However, know that that's not the push for the meeting either. You need to know those things so that you can confidently talk about them. But that meeting is for you to do some fact finding, to find out what the individual or organization you're attempting to partner with prioritizes. What are their needs? And that's basically the question I ask. I'm here, I can tell you all the things that we do. And I had a presentation put together of the things that we do. Not a PowerPoint, not something formal of this nature, but a folder that had different pamphlets, information related to what the faculty engaged in, what the centers engaged in, what we did. And then I also had my business card and links to websites so that the individual could go and do additional information and fact finding. But the purpose of sharing that was to ask, what is it that you need? What's most important to you and your organization? What are the outcomes and goals that you're attempting to achieve? And when I asked those questions, I could see the body language change, the overall language change. And what happened, I'll go back to Tuscaloosa City Schools and Fayette County Schools and Memphis City Schools at the time. During those conversations, the person rattled off a long list, a laundry list of things that they were interested in, prioritized, things that were important, goals that they had to achieve, as well as timelines. What that gave me was the time to sit back just for a few seconds and align our strengths with their needs. There's no way for us to meet all of their needs, nor do they want us to. But what is a good alignment? And what is something that we do well that they need done, and that together we can do well? It was easy for me to do that. And I told them, I said, well, these are the things that overlap. Let's think about this. From that conversation, of course, I only met with the superintendent every once in a while. That's just to get in the door, because you really can't do other things. Sometimes it depends on who you're working with, which organizations, and I'll give examples of other organizations as well. But sometimes you need the support from the top so that you can move the work forward at different levels. From that point, he assigned the assistant superintendent of curriculum to work with me. And we created, he met with us, we talked about what he wanted, what we could provide. And I had personal visits with this individual. So I would go to her office and have those conversations to see what they needed and how we could align with it. And after I gathered that information, then I could look and see what the faculty had in common or what their interests were. So prior to going to conduct the initial meeting, whether it's a department or a center or a different organization, it's important that you know the strengths of the people that are around you. You need to know their strengths, you need to know their interests, you need to know their weaknesses, what things they're going to struggle with, and how they're going to align with what you're attempting to do. And all of that's developed over time. The first part, you have it before you go, but how they're going to align develops over time, and you bring them into the process. So whoever you're going to be working with, you know what they're doing, you know who they're going to connect with, and the goals are clear up front. So throughout the process, you're identifying, these are the steps, these are the tasks, this is who is responsible, and there's some accountability. Because in this partnership development process, if you don't have accountability and things fall through the cracks, then these organizations and individuals are not going to want to continue to partner with you.
So Dr. Nichols,
Yes.
we have a question. Is the process unique to school-university partnerships?
It was developed for
Okay.
school-university partnerships. It has been expanded to include health partners, community partners, and social services partners. So it's been used with all these different entities.
Thank you.
An example of a health partner, the Common Table here in Memphis, is one of the health partners that I've worked with. And together, I sat down with them just the same way as with the superintendent and asked them what their goals were. What things were they attempting to accomplish? And after listening to them, I was able to tell them, here are my strengths. And this is what I can do to assist, because I wasn't doing that as attempting to move a group of individuals into a partnership, but I was doing that on a volunteer basis with them. But I used the same model. And through that partnership, we were able to identify various partners that they already had established. For example, the, what is it called? The health department, the Shelby County Health Department, the YMCA, some of the charter schools that they were working with on an initiative, but they needed funding for that. So my part in that was bringing in an education lens and writing the grant. So I collectively talked to all the different individuals using this model to create that grant and to have it funded for them. So
that's a good example.
Thank you. Part of that, the personal visits, what you need to know on the front end is you're going to exert more energy and time and effort than your partners in the beginning. Typically, whoever is attempting to establish the partnership will be the one that is going to exert the most energy, and it can be tiring. The personal visits, you're going to see them. In the climate that we're in now, because we're not going out to see individuals, we're going to be reaching out to them to schedule the telephone calls or the Zoom calls. You're going to be conducting them. You're going to make sure that there's some meat in those meetings when you have them. That happens up front. Be prepared to know that there will be people who do not show up. There will be meetings that are canceled at the last minute. So those are things that just take place in the journey. But while you're having those personal visits, you're collecting all of the information that you need in order to be effective. So you're addressing the needs. What you're designing is a way to address your needs, whether it's your center needs, your department needs, your individual faculty needs, and the needs of the partner. It can't be one-sided. Oftentimes when we go to organizations, if we go in and tell them what we want to do without asking them what they need and showing that there's an alignment between the two, they become frustrated and they tend to shut down before we even get started. So there has to be facilitation. There's more facilitation on the front end on your side if you're establishing the partnership. Once you have the trust, which is really important, then it's facilitation between both. And you're moving forward, developing a plan, and you're giving access to various resources. So I provided resources and the organizations provided access to resources and the ability to do different things. So for me, going in, the purpose was not for me to conduct my research as the primary purpose. That was the secondary purpose. The primary purpose was to address a need. And while addressing that need, I need access to be able to conduct this research. In order for me to continue doing what I'm doing, I have to conduct research, have it analyzed, and published. I need access to people or things in order to get this done. You have the people and things, and I'm going to provide this resource. The faculty are going to work with you on this, then this is the access that we need. And it always was available. I did not have any partner out of all the partners I've worked with say, no, you cannot conduct research. They may have wanted to tweak some things, and we worked together on that, but really the research was designed with them. So because it was designed with them, they had access to everything. It was a very good process. In addition to that, know that there are going to be some disagreements, and you have to determine what you can live with and what you can live without. If you're doing community engaged research, then part of those disagreements is just realizing that it may not play out the way that you thought it would. Maybe there's a different variable that hasn't been considered. Maybe there's some outlying factors that weigh in on how things are done and what those processes are. How can we work through those? And with conversation, planning, and working together, you can do that. Facilitating the project is dual. In that, I mentioned a little earlier that you have to identify the task, who's responsible for implementing those tasks, and have some accountability. If you don't do that, then your partnership is going to be dismantled. It's not going to stand the test of time. You can always replace pieces. There will be people coming and going. There will be things that change, something you do this time that you won't do next time. But if you don't have trust, consistency, and accountability, then the partnership development process falls apart. After you create your initial plan together, you implement it. And during the implementation, it's just like with any other project or study that you may conduct. You're going through the process, following it the way that it was designed. But while you're doing that, you're also observing. The observation is, one, to see if things were implemented with fidelity, if that is necessary, or if they're implemented the way that they were designed to be implemented. If individuals followed through, if there was some difficulty following through, because life happens, sometimes things don't happen the way we planned them to, but was there responsibility taken for that, and was it addressed? And did it work? Is it working for both parties? If there's something that's working really well, then let's talk about what's working really well and how we can maintain that or scale that up over time. Maybe not at this time, but over time. If it's not working, what's not working and why isn't it working, and how do we address it? Part of partnership development is making sure that you address the concerns and not ignore them. If you ignore the concerns, they fester. They cause issues, they cause problems that can thwart your outcomes and cause ill feelings, and you have a very different relationship than what is needed, the professional relationship that's needed to be impactful and effective. So it's all a part, a big part of it is communication. From the beginning to the end, it's communication. Consistent communication, clear communication, open and honest communication. If you can't do something, don't promise it. If you promise something and you find that you don't have the authority to do it, or you don't have the support or the manpower to do it, then say that. And then you can work through those things. So after your first phase, you're going to analyze. You observe and you analyze what you have, and then you're going to put together a short technical report. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but it does have to say, this is what we did, these were the outcomes, this worked well, these things we need to address. Then you go back and you design again. So you take that, if everything's working well and you don't need to address anything, you can keep moving forward and design the next phase. However, typically, we're all humans. We may see something that we want to add in or something we want to take out. There's usually some tweaking going on there in the process. So you're designing again, and there's design all the way through. Part of it is very similar to the way that engineers do research. It's a continual trying things out, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and you keep moving through that process. So you're preparing for your next, after you design, you're going to prepare for your next phase of implementation. And then in your second phase of implementation, you're doing the same thing. You're implementing, you're observing, it's cyclical. It continues to go through. And what you'll find is at the end of your partnership, well, it's not the end of the partnership, it's the end of your project. At the end of this project, you have these goals, you have these different things that you've accomplished, you see what works, you see what doesn't work. You also know what the strengths of your organization and the people in your organization are. You now know the strengths of the organization that you're working with and the needs of both, and you may continue the project that you're working on, or you develop a new project. It is a cyclical model that keeps you engaged and involved. It's not something that you come to, you do it, and you go your separate ways. You can if you choose to, but you could definitely continue working over years. So for example, the first year that I worked with the Common Table, I helped them write a grant for, I think it was B248, and it was related to how children should engage in screen time, sleep, the types of food that they should eat, the types of exercise they should engage in on a daily basis. And it was in conjunction with Shelby County Health Department, the Y, and charter school. The next year, it continued, but we brought in Vance Youth Development Center, and a health fair was hosted by Vance Youth Development Center in conjunction with Lemoyne-Owen College, and Common Table was one of the supporters. And they brought in these other entities to provide services such as mammogram screening and simple mental health screening, whether it was blood pressure, different things. And they had various professionals come in and conduct short sessions with the community members on ways to improve their quality of life doing these simple things. So it was one project that we initiated and went through the process. And after that project was successful, then rather than walking away, we said, okay, well, let's invite these other individuals in and let's do something for the South Memphis community and bring in the partners that you have access to in this way. So it can continue to grow, and it can grow differently. As those networks expand, you may find that one entity is not involved in something, but because you've cultivated these other relationships and partnerships, then you can do something similar or different with another member of that network. So that's something that is ongoing here, actually. It was interrupted this spring because of COVID. That would have been the third year, but we'll continue again this year to attempt to do those same types of things in the South Memphis community. Now, all of this isn't rosy. I want to quickly share that sometimes because of our positions at the university, we're asked to engage with entities that are not doing well, especially in teacher education. So with the Fayette County schools, this one has been a while ago, but when I was invited to do that, it was because the school district had been identified as a failing school district. And the state asked that the university step in and assist them. So my role was as a special education faculty member. And in many ways, special education in the district was being considered as the reason that the district was overall failing. So it was a very tense relationship in the beginning. And I had to go in and basically win the trust of the director of exceptional children and let her know that I'm here to help you. There's nothing that I want to do that would jeopardize your job or anyone here. I just want to make sure that if I have the skills to help, that you allow me to help you. So I drove to Fayette County, which is over an hour from my house and the university, on a weekly basis for about a month, working with her to design things that we could put in place that would help them. Initially, what I was doing was just service. Meeting with her, identifying the needs, meeting with the teachers and the administrators, identifying their needs, and putting together a plan for that. And that plan was job embedded, ongoing, bi-monthly professional development. What we were able to do was to implement that on a contingency. If it worked, we would continue. We ended up doing that for 3 years. We started out with inclusion and co-teaching, and we trained all of their teachers that were co-teaching on how to use the model, how to implement. It included observations in the schools, monthly meetings with principals, continual analysis. CREP was a large part of that. The first year CREP was not. The second year CREP was, because at that point, the trust was built, the outcomes were established. We wrote a grant that was funded, and we wrote CREP into the grant. So they were a huge part of what we did for the next 2 years, sending out third-party evaluators to conduct the analysis and data collection for a lot of that project. By the time that we ended, they had completely turned around their special ed area. And I'm not saying that it's because of what I did, but it's because of the buy-in on both sides, because they were actively engaged. They ensured that their teachers were there, meeting with me, half a day, 2 days per month for 3 years. Their principals were meeting with me on a monthly basis for 3 years. In the summers, we created conferences that were held on campus at the University of Memphis, and the faculty across several departments were the individuals that actually presented at the conferences. From that, faculty members then developed additional networks and relationships within the district, and they were able to conduct their own research there, and they were able to have different grants and contracts in the district as well. So for me, the purpose of professional partnership development is not one-sided and just specific to expanding my network. I always attempt to bring other individuals along, because if we can all work together collectively, we can do more. It will be more beneficial to the community around us, And if it's more, excuse me, more beneficial to the community around us, then it's going to be more beneficial to us. Because if we're doing more with more people, then we have the ability to acquire more grants, have more publications, have more presentations. That it's secondary, but it really does fuel what we have to do on a daily basis. And you get to see some really great outcomes from that. Additionally, with Fayette County, by the end of that third year, they were recognized by the state, and Mr. Fisher came down and did a presentation with them, and they received some different recognition, accolades and recognitions from the senators and congressmen from their area. So they were doing some really good work. I literally picked that same model up and took it to Tuscaloosa and followed through there. And it worked really well. The Common Table, actually, I started working with them while I was in Tuscaloosa. And as well as Vance and the Achievement School District. I took a year sabbatical to just see what was going on in the Achievement School District, because I was getting so many mixed messages, and I wasn't a proponent of charter schools, really still am not, but I wanted to check it out and see what was going on. So I had the opportunity to serve as the Director of Special Education or Exceptional Children for one of the groups. And in that, noticed a lot of need across the district when it came to services, not just special education, across the board, whether it's counseling, school counseling, mental health counseling, even physical education, physical therapy, any of the auxiliary services. There were some needs there. There were needs there. So being able to work with them to address some of those things was really good. And then again, when I went to USM, we picked it up and used it in the Petal School District. So what I found is the model works, whether it's with struggling schools or with schools that are rated as #1 in the state. It's been used in both situations, as well as with other districts that just fell in the middle. And it worked really well with them as well. And it's worked in rural, suburban, and urban areas. And it's worked in schools and in other social service and various other types of entities. So just to move us along here, in the introductory period, just want to reinforce a couple of really key things. In the introductory period, do your homework. Make sure that you know what's going on, that you're ready for the process. Know that it is not going to be easy. It may be, and if so, then that's wonderful. If not, then just go with the flow. What you will have to do is investigate and get background information before you go. Just like when you're going somewhere and people are expecting you, it's nice if they know your name, and it's even better if they can pronounce it correctly. You want to make sure that you've done your background work, and you want to prepare your presentation. You're not just walking in and having a cold conversation about your research. You can, or whatever your product may be, or service that you're offering. You want to be able to connect what you do with their needs and what they do. And then you have to determine after that first meeting, are you going to adjust? Because you'll have to adjust based on what they tell you, what their needs are, what their priorities are, how they align. So what adjustment are you going to make, or are you going to retreat? And that's a decision that has to be made. You can have that conversation and decide this is not a good fit. I don't believe we should move forward at this time. I enjoy, I look forward to possibly working with you in the future. Or you can realign and keep moving forward. The priority alignment, when you're doing that, it's parallel worlds. It's not the same. They 99% of the time, they're not going to ever blend together. They're always going to be parallel. And that considered, are there intersections between the priorities and of both organizations? So here I have district priorities, department priorities, but it doesn't have to be a school district. It can be any entity. If you're working with St. Jude or La Bonheur, or if you're working with, I can see her face. She's been here for quite some time, but I cannot call the name. But it's Center for Individuals with Disabilities here in the city, or any group.
Sandy Klink?
I'm sorry?
Sandy Klink?
Yes, yes. It doesn't matter.
Memphis Center for Independent Living.
Thank you. It
Yes.
was, I could see the location, but I could not call the name. If there's an intersection, you need to know where those intersections are, and just realize that it's two separate entities. And that's really important because they're two different expectations. They may be similar, they may overlap, but they're two different expectations. What is expected at the university and the process that we have to go through in order to even work with some of these entities is its own set of processes, steps. And then they have the same thing in place in their organization. Depending upon the organization that you work with, some of those organizations may have multiple complex steps, and others may have just one individual you need to talk to. But it depends on the size, the influence, all those different things come into play. So you'll have to think about that before you go in. And when you're aligning, you have to keep that in mind, because it can slow down your work. If you're working with an entity that has 10 layers that you have to go through before you can start anything, then you need to think about that on your calendar and how it's going to impact when you will be able to implement. If it's one individual that you call and have a conversation with, and they can make the call, then you may start work next week. But those things are very important when you're planning what you're going to do. Then you're going to define your target, choose with both in mind. You're going to choose them collaboratively. You're going to identify your first steps and formalize your partnership. With the partnerships that I've developed through the university, I've always had an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. With the partnerships that I've developed individually, some of them I had MOUs and others I did not. Your long-term commitment, this is really important to you being able to sustain and grow your partnerships. The long-term commitment, you have to know who's going to be in the key roles, what the responsibilities are, how the information is going to be disseminated, what your timeline is, your benchmarks, when you're going to review and amend, and how you're going to assess and review what you're doing. I personally use a program management software tool when I'm working on partnership development, so that I can lay it out over time and I can see what my benchmarks are, what my goals are, and keep track of things. Again, this is just an example of outcomes. There are a lot of different outcomes with different entities that I've worked with, but here those I've basically talked about. What I didn't mention is in which school, it was Tuscaloosa City Schools. I had to actually present the information to the school board before we could move forward at one of the school board meetings. It was, my presentation at the meeting was rescheduled 2 or 3 times. So that, you know, that's the reason I say you have to be ready for some of those things. But I did present it at a school board meeting. I had to stand there and answer their questions, the questions of some of the community members that were there as well. And the interesting thing, when I finished presenting, one of the school board members got up out of her seat, walked over to me, grabbed me and hugged me, and said, "Thank you, we've never had anything like this happen before." That was eye-opening. Literally, my colleagues were conducting research out of state. None of them were doing any research in the area. All of their research was out of state. And I don't think it was because they did not want to work with the district. They just didn't know how to. The way that they approached it was off-putting to the district. And by the time that we finished with the process, 75% of them have full active research going on in the district. They were expanding to districts outside of Tuscaloosa, and several of them had grants that were in place with the district as well. So it does work. It is hard work, and it's rewarding work at the same time. What I can say is with each school district, not actual organizations or entities, but with each school district that I've had the opportunity to partner with, I've also been able to write for funding with them and to present at national and international conferences with them. So it's been a mutually beneficial partnership for us. When you're working with any group, here I have faculty and district reps, but when you're working with any group, you have to realize that everybody is not going to be interested in what you're doing. Some are going to be reluctant or gun shy because of previous things that happened when they attempted to do something similar. So are you sure? They may be willing, but they may be very cautious about how they're going to move forward. There will be doubters. There will be individuals who, I tried it before, it won't work, and they're not budging. And you'll have those who refuse to do it at all. Just count me out, I'm not interested. So know that you will deal with that. It's just a part of it. And I'll also tell you, as the partnership becomes, once it's set and established and doing well, several of those individuals will then come back and say, you know, I would like to work with you. And for me, I'm okay with that, and actually welcome that. With the districts, sometimes districts or organizations in general have been burned, whether it's by the university or an individual or something that has happened, and they want to know what the risk is. So what I found after doing research and after building the partnership was that with Tuscaloosa City Schools, there was a faculty member who had conducted research there before, who said that the information would not be released in a way that would identify the district. And when it was published with all the district information in there. And it was, not only did it have district information, it had specific teacher names. Mm-hmm. And it was a very difficult situation. It was not handled appropriately. Not only was it published in research journals, it was published in just the regular media with all this information. So there was some really bad blood there that I was not aware of, that I had to work through to address that. So know that sometimes there may be some things that you don't know about that have taken place, and you're working through those. The individuals in the organizations also may have fear. Why are you wanting to work with us? How will the results be used? How will they be disseminated? So just think about those things, and know that once you've built the trust, they know that you're consistent and that you're all working for the greater good, that those things really don't have a lot of impact in the end. Initially, they can.
Dr. Nichols, we have about 5 minutes, 6 minutes left, and we have 2 questions. One was, have you had an incident where a partner increased their ask and expectations past your capacity? And how did you approach how did you respond to that partner?
I have had partners ask that, and in the response, I've told them, these are our resources. If we stretch beyond a certain point, then we will be ineffective and mediocre. And I don't like to be mediocre. So it's best that we stay here, or in other words, we stay in our lane. And once we completed this project, or if we want to rethink this and do something differently, then we can do that. And we can also plan to scale up. If we sit back and talk through it and see how we might be able to scale up, if that's possible, then we can look at those things. It may be bringing in other entities or other groups that will assist with that, but I've not been pressured into doing something that I cannot do well, or at least go in with the idea that I'm going to do my best to do a really good job, and it's not going to stretch me so thin that I'll be ineffective, just because I have those conversations with them and let them know, this is what we have, this is what we can do right now. We can either look at adjusting what we're doing, or we can talk about future plans for scale up.
Thank you. Similar to what you would do when you're talking about your dissertation and your future research.
Yes.
My
Can't
proposal.
do all the research at one time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Another question was, what can we do as faculty members or centers to better share our resources that we do have on campus for research and collaborative opportunities once they're identified, once the needs are identified?
Okay. What I like to do and plan to start in the spring are scholarship circles, and that is a monthly meeting where individuals come in and share their interest in research. Typically, in the past when I've done them, we've had 2 individuals to share their research and interest, and it's a formal presentation to those that are there, and then we discuss and have questions. And what I've seen come out of that is networking and working together on research and grant opportunities, studies, even classwork. So if someone's doing something related, and it's research driven, but if you're doing something in your research that relates to someone's class, then there's this conversation that happens. I'm doing this, what about this? And I've seen individuals working together. They've created community projects where they're providing services out in the school, they're conducting research, they're getting publications, and they are presenting nationally and internationally together. So the plan is to start those in January in the ICL department, but they're open to everybody. And right now, the thought is that it will be the first Friday of of the month at noon. I'll see how that works. But everyone here is more than welcome to participate.
Thank you. I know Janet and I would like to be present during those, so that would
Great.
be really helpful. We have,
Additionally, sometimes if we build out our websites, which I'm at fault of not doing that, mine is not up anywhere right now, but you know, I've noticed that really nicely developed websites that tell research interests, projects that individuals are engaged in the service. A lot of people will click on those and look for contributors or partners that way as well.
sure. Thank you. We have 1 or 2 minutes left. How would you like to wrap up, or are there any other questions?
Well, if there aren't any other questions, this is basically my last slide. And it is, don't give up. The rewards are invaluable. The work is worth it. As I mentioned in the beginning, the effort is going to be, you're going to exert more effort on your part if you're the one that's attempting to establish the partnership. You will see that begin to level out. And over time, you'll notice that your partner is giving more effort than you are. It just depends on where you are in the stage and what's taking place, what the tasks are. So definitely make sure it's something that you're passionate about, something that you enjoy, something that you find meaning in, so that when it does get rough, you don't want to walk away from it. So that's basically the way that I would end it. And I would welcome any conversations if you're interested in talking more about partnership development in general, if you're interested in partnership development research. What I've noticed is there's not a lot of research related to education or any of the fields within our college focused on partnership research. Most of the information that I pull from to design the model and to put things in place came from business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your taking your time to do this. I'm glad it helps you. Just as any partnership, it's help me help you. So that works very well. And I do appreciate it. I've recorded this, so we'll be able to put it on our College of Education website. And that people that weren't able to attend are able to actually see the presentation. And I just want to thank you and everybody for participating today.
Well, thank you for having me, and everyone, thank you for participating. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Nichols.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.